Hello everybody and welcome back to episode 26 of Coaches Co-Creating. And today myself and Jasmine, we're going to be talking about the subject of worrying and asking whether it can ever be helpful. So Jasmine, we'll ask you first. Do you think that worrying can ever be helpful?
Well, I guess we have to define what is worrying. For me, of course there's different levels, but when you say worrying, for me it's something really negative actually, and it's something that when I worry, for example, I drive myself a bit crazy, going round and round. Oh, this might happen, that might happen, what if this happens, thinking about all the worst case scenarios. So in my case, my definition of worrying, I would say it's not helpful at all for me, because actually it just makes me feel really bad and really negative, and it can be quite depressing, and it never really gets me to where I want to be. It's only when I stop worrying that I get to where I want to be. What do you think? It's a difficult one. What's your definition of worrying?
For me, it's a series or a collection of thoughts which tend to be speculative about the future, about what might happen, like you said, the what ifs, and I think that's where it starts to fall apart, because generally worrying is well, they say it's creating your future in a negative way, isn't it? But I think for me, worrying comes from a place of fear generally. So it's not just a collection of any old thoughts, it's actually based upon what might be, and that scenario isn't what you want. And
you can actually spend, I've spent, if I had to calculate how many hours in my life I've spent worrying, it's a lot. It's way too much. It's way too much. And looking back now, it didn't help me at all, And it's only now I'm starting to realize, still sometimes I go through stages where something's happening and then I just can't stop worrying about it, and I spend a whole week thinking about it, worrying, and then that thing that I was thinking might happen didn't happen, and then it's like, oh my god, I spent that whole time thinking about it and it didn't even happen. And it's like, I don't know, then you just have to let it go, don't you? Because there's no point beating yourself up afterwards. But I think sometimes as well, worrying for me can be my comfort zone. It's a habit that I need to break, and it's part of my comfort zone. Whereas other people, I used to be a compulsive worrier, I would say. So it's definitely a habit that I've had, that I got from my mum.
It almost feels addictive, I think, doesn't it? That's the thing. I think people you get into a way of being, and that being is to be constantly ruminating over thoughts about what might happen, and it becomes your status quo. It's what you how you operate almost, and it's about breaking that cycle, that habit of thought.
Exactly. And if you've done it your whole life, it's not easy, is it? It's not easy to break.
No, and I think that's the thing, is actually the first thing to be to start breaking that cycle is to be aware.
Definitely,
and that's one thing, is actually to be aware that this thought that you're having is about something that hasn't yet presented, and so it is about trying to break that down and actually stop yourself in the moment. And one word I used to use, and I used to use this in the middle of the night, is bogus. I used to say, if I was worrying about something that might happen, I'd say, that's bogus, you just made that up. And I'm talking to myself here, so I sound like like vaguely disjointed, but
not at all.
I'm actually saying to myself, bogus, you just made that up, to try and stop myself in the moment.
Interrupting
the worry. And saying, hold on a minute, that doesn't sound like that's, but what you said actually about the fact that you've spent so much time in your life where you've worried about something and it's never come to fruition. The book I'm reading at the moment, The Untethered Soul, he talks about that, the fact that we trust our mind, we trust ourselves in judgments about things all the time. And yet when it lets us down, when we've worried about something for a long time and then it doesn't happen, why do we then go back to the mind and allow it to do it to us again?
Because it's comfortable, familiar, easy maybe. The brain likes routine.
It's interesting because one of the questions that I posed last week online on social media was this question about worrying, could it ever be helpful? And a few people came back and said yes, they find worrying or having a degree of worry, it makes them more productive, it gets them into action, it gets them into gear. And I was just looking to sort of define that differently and say, well, I would say that's not necessarily worry, I would say that's concern. I think worry comes from a very distinct place of fear.
Exactly.
Concern is different.
And for me, that sounds like they're just being aware of something that they need to do or something that could happen. Whereas a worry for me is, you're not always thinking clearly, are you? If you're worrying, are you? I mean, for me, it's not clarity. It's not clarity when you're in a state of worry.
Worry is quite stressful.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there's neuroscience to prove that if you're stressed, your prefrontal cortex, where your brain's doing all the thinking, all the cognitive stuff, it's cut off, it's shut down, or it's not able to function normally. So you've not got that clarity of thought. So your worry is actually just feeding itself.
Oh God, it's awful.
Right. And when you stop worrying, that's when you'll open yourself up.
Wow. Yes. But we'll talk more about this in detail on LinkedIn. So if you're watching the replay now, go over and watch us on LinkedIn, on Amanda's page, and we will see you there. Any questions, please let us know, or comments. Okay, bye.